even if it came from the market, even if it came from the wet market. In either case, they knew more than they said. In either case, the World Health Organization knew more than it said, or should have known more than it said. But I said, what you have to understand is all governments lie. Even American government, America lies, China lies, Russia lies, Ukraine lies, all government lies when they think it's in their best interest. And so it is a very scary time for the world economy right now. I do not know. Nobody really knows.
How long will the global economy recover after the pandemic? Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to talk with a really interesting and person with a great experience from USA, Kazakhstan and Malaysia. And personally for me, I think that the information about the contribution of this person is greatly under-evaluated based on the information that is given in the internet. This is Professor Ken Harvey. Hi, Ken.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So let's start. I have a few questions about the COVID-19 and university matters and some others. Okay, what do you really think? How do you really think what really happened in Wuhan actually?
Well, we really can't investigate it. One of the problems of any country that does not have a truly free press is that you can't really know the truth. It's even like when I was teaching in Kazakhstan, I tried to explain to my students there that how to evaluate the news. Most of them were receiving their news from Russia. Russian TV, basically, and so when I first got there was about the time when Russia invaded Georgia. So it was before the Ukraine invasion, but rather the Georgian invasion. Mm-hmm. And when I first said they should be skeptical of the Russian news, they all got upset with me. They were on attack mode, and so I tried to help them understand what I was saying. That is, how to compare it to American media, for example. And so what I pointed out is that, both have their biases. There's no question that no news is perfect. But at the time, the American news was giving very negative press to President George Bush. And so clearly, George Bush was not controlling them in their coverage of the Russian invasion of Georgia. He had almost no control other than in America, obviously the reports from the generals and people from the government would control to some degree their ability, the information they were trying to use in their news reports, obviously. Whereas the news reports from Moscow was clearly controlled, by the government. And so they both have their biases, and you have to listen to them, you have to view them accordingly. The American press has a very liberal bias. So currently they have a very liberal bias, and almost about 90% of their news reports are anti-Trump. And so you have a very anti-Trump bias, but at the same time, just like in the reporting about Georgia, they still were raised, those journalists were typically raised, in America during the Cold War, and they are going to have some anti-Russian bias as well. So they have anti-Bush bias, anti-Putin bias, or Russian bias, and now in this situation, the American press will have anti-Trump bias and anti-China bias. And so, there's problems in reporting from two fronts. But meanwhile, in China, they kick out all the foreign reporters. They control the Chinese reporters. So how can you truly evaluate it it's very difficult. As an American, I have, some tendency to believe the American, a combination, the American press and the American government to some degree, more than the Chinese government and the Chinese press. Having worked for a China-owned university now for 3 years, that's obviously, on the one hand, gives me more insights. Many of my colleagues are from China. Many of my students are from China. In fact, many of my students are children of Communist Party officials. So that also influences what I can say, no matter what I think, obviously, but you can read between the lines a little bit. And I'm rather blunt sometimes, even to the degree of jeopardizing my own job. I'm old enough that I can afford to do that a little bit. So bottom line is, I think the reports out of China trying to blame the U.S. military doesn't add up. The timeline doesn't add up. That American military at a military game sort of thing in Wuhan would have initiated that massive infection rate. They're so much ahead of the infection in America. So I don't believe that. I think that is propaganda.
Yeah.
There is additional evidence that I'm seeing from press besides the American press that, with advertisements from the Wuhan lab that they were hiring people with expertise in bats and bat viruses back as of November 15th. So I think that's pretty damning evidence. You could say that they knew sooner than they said they knew, and a lot of other evidence that they knew more than they admitted. And they continued allowing their people to fly to the West while actually trying to strong arm some of the countries, especially the weaker countries that threatened to stop flights from China. They kept those flights coming in because they were threatened by China, whereas America did stop them, but it still didn't matter. It's still massive infections in America at that point, once we realized that what was happening. So, and then there's also the evidence that China bought up, hundreds of millions of protective gear before they would allow it to be sold outside the country. So, they have all this manufacturing in China. In many cases, like the 3M company, for example, is an American company, but manufacturing there, and they were limited in how much of their product they could send out to the country until China had what they wanted. So that also puts them in a situation of bad faith. That even if it's totally accidental, even if it came from the market, even if it came from the wet market, in either case, they knew more than they said. In either case, the World Health Organization knew more than it said, or should have known more than it said. I think there's enough evidence that I would lean that direction, that at the very least, they did not inform the world soon enough about what they already knew. Yeah. And they tried to silence their own doctors. I think that is pretty clear.
Yeah. And then, by the way, the USA Today, in the recent publication, just called on Congress to isolate China and imposing the sanctions against them. So, because China kept that totalitarian regime and they kept very silent and just assured the world that everything is under control and everything will be okay. How do you think, is it a good step about the USA?
Well, I think American politics sometimes gets in their own way. Right now is not a good time to threaten China because all of our antibiotics, all of our medicines are coming from China, our protective gear is coming from China. So even though I might, I am hesitant to support that right now, whereas at the same time, America and the West should learn from this experience that they should not have their well-being controlled by an outside force. They need to be very concerned about being that overly dependent on any one country, no matter who it is. Because, one thing I told my students early on on this, one of my students who I think is the child of a Communist Party leader, I posted one of the early posts by a former spy, apparently from Israel, that suggested it came from the lab. And the student said, "Oh, no, it came from the wet market. We know it came from the wet market." And I said, my response was kind of what I said about the Georgian situation with Russia. But I said, what you have to understand is all governments lie. Even American government, America lies, China lies, Russia lies, Ukraine lies, all government lies when they think it's in their best interest. Now the difference is if you have a free press, you can try to poke through those lies a little bit. If you don't have a free press, it's hard to poke through the lies. But there's no question. When you go all the way back in America, back to when I was starting my career as a journalist, back to the Pentagon Papers. The Pentagon Papers revealed lies by the American government. And the government tried, even though most of the lies were done under previous administrations, many of them under Democrat administrations, even the Nixon administration found it in their best interest to try to stop the Pentagon Papers from being published. Because all presidents have a common, they feel like they have a common need at times to deceive the public. Now that's not good. I hate that policy, but then I've never been president. But I cannot condone lies, particularly lies for the purpose of getting public support for something that's not true, such as some of the lies they told about the Vietnam War, for example, were to try to get the Americans more supportive of the Vietnam War when they knew it was a lie. I don't think anybody should go to prison for revealing classified information when it's purely to deceive the American, the people of your own country. So I can't support that. No matter how conservative I might be, I can't support that. I don't think Daniel Ellsberg, maybe I need to know more, but my sentiment is Daniel Ellsberg should not have gone to prison for revealing the Pentagon Papers. Because most of it was not to protect America, it was to protect politicians in America. And a court in America should recognize the difference. So that's my, overall, so when I was talking to these students, or this one student who protested my reposting this post from Israel, I admitted I don't know, but I do know that all governments lie. I know that. So I have to take everything, to some degree, everything with a grain of salt. I have to look at the environment in which the reports exist and the degree to which the press can evaluate those reports. I don't know what else to do, and be honest in my work as a professor or as a journalist.
That's a great challenge. We got the innovation. And did you hear now that USA stopped financing the World Health Organization?
Yes.
Yeah.
From everything I've seen, that's probably, I think the American press overreacts to that. Again, they're very anti-Trump. And I think what Trump is basically saying is, prove to us that you're a worthwhile organization. You know, if you spend half your money on travel instead of on actually doing something of worthwhile, and if the reports you give us are false, then what good are you to us? I tend to lean with Trump in that I think many United Nations organizations have been taken over by people that are very anti-American. When you have countries led by dictators or people with that sort of authoritarian power involved with the human rights organization, for example, that's a joke. That just becomes a farce. You know, so, and that in many cases, that's the sort of thing we have with the United Nations, where you have countries involved that are in violation of human rights, but they're telling everybody else about, you know, they're judging everybody else on their human rights. And things like that, that is ridiculous. So I want the United Nations to be run properly, but the truth is the way it's organized, in many cases, it isn't.
Okay. And let's move to Malaysia. What experience can you share with us, and what happened? How does your university work now, and what difficulties have you encountered there, just in this period?
Well, we encountered an instructional problem sooner than most universities, because we ended our fall semester around the middle of January, before people reported, you know, before China was being honest about the problem, and before the rest of the world could evaluate it. Consequently, we have 5,000 students. This is a brand new university, so it's about 4 years old is all. And about 2,000 of our 5,000 students are from mainland China. The rest are from other countries. Many of them are Chinese descent from Malaysia, but we also have African students. We have some students from Kazakhstan, about last I saw, 15 to 20 from Kazakhstan, and more others from Central Asia. Like I say, they're recruiting quite heavy from Africa. So we have quite a few other students, and many of them, we do have Malays from Malay ethnicity and Indians from Indian ethnicity, but largely from within Malaysia. Malaysia has a very diverse, population, but those are the three main ethnicities: Chinese, Malay, and Indian. Malay is the controlling ethnicity, obviously, and the other two are still very strong. Under British colonization, Indians were brought in to kind of run the place, but now they're kind of been demoted dramatically in their influence once they gained independence, and Malays became more capable and more in control, regardless, and more capable in their ability to run the government, more educated, things like that, since their freedom occurred. So all of those ethnicities are represented at the university. I'm not sure exactly how it's broken up, but since it is a Chinese-owned university, we do have a lot of ethnic Chinese from Malaysia, as well as the mainland Chinese. So at that break, 2,000 students went home to China to celebrate the New Year's, and they got stuck there. So, the world also suddenly found out what was happening, and they could not come back. So we began our distance learning program in February. So we taught classes for our on-campus students, 3,000 on-campus students, live in class, in classrooms, and then 2,000 over the internet. So that was kind of juggling two types of instruction at the same time. But that was a short semester, only 5 weeks, whereas most universities have their short semester in the summer. We have ours in the winter. And then we just began our next long semester that will last until August. This one is now all distance learning. So we have nobody learning on campus anymore. So that's how we've gone through it. We're using Moodle distance learning, learning management system. Mostly doing our creating videos in advance. I do some live instruction on Zoom. If it's I have two small classes, relatively. One has only 17 and one has, trying to remember, I think it has like less than 30 anyway. So those I can handle on Zoom okay, but I have a large class approaching 70 now, and I'm not going to try to use Zoom on a class of 70. I might set it, well, nah, I don't think there's even worth it. I'll use a forum, a text forum for that class. The other ones I'll do some Zooming so they can ask questions live, in addition to the video recorded lectures. So I'll do a little bit of Zooming.
Is it harder for you to contact with every student or with the entire group of students in a distance method, or just like it was easier by face-to-face to resolve some questions?
I think it's very valuable to be able to do it face-to-face. When I was in Kazakhstan, I was a professor at one of their top universities called KMEP University, a private university started by, I think the president had dual citizenship. He taught in America for decades, but he's from Korea. So he may have had dual citizenship or maybe, I don't know. But anyway, regardless, he used a Western style approach. He was at the behest of President Nazarbayev, who was the first and very long-lasting president of Kazakhstan until a year or so ago. He started the English-only institute, which later turned into a full university, to teach Western economics, free economics, free market. And so that was, anyway, there I was 9 years, and I was their distance learning coordinator. I kind of created their distance learning program. And one of the things I told them is that even in normal circumstances, or especially in normal circumstances, you don't ever want to lose some live face-to-face instruction from the professor, or you lose its value. So like Coursera cannot ask as much money, cannot charge as much money as a university with some live instruction. But once they go to all recorded instruction, it loses its value. And so that would be my suggestion to any university. You can't afford not to have some live instruction under at least normal circumstances. And that's, and consequently, by the way, KMEP University is currently, they've gone to distance learning. And my stepson, who goes there still, says that most of his instructors are using Zoom for most of their lecture. So they're doing most of their lectures live, which would be, when it's possible, would be my suggestion, is keep, we did, an American survey and one we did at KMEP suggested that students like to have online instruction accessible when they want to have it. So it's on demand, basically. But they still like to have, they would prefer to have some face-to-face instruction at least once a week. Now, on a real university, at a brick and mortar university, that could be in a classroom, but I would say Zoom or any high quality, just a video conferencing system might be adequate to still maintain that sense of value. That's yet to be shown or studied, I don't think, as to how people will value a Zoom-based course as opposed to a totally recorded and on-demand course. But that's my sense. And from the survey in America was like 70,000 students. The survey I did was like 70 students, so not very comparative, but the results were the same. The results actually were the same. that the students wanted to have some human contact, but still liked the idea of having the flexibility of less human contact and more on-demand access. So that's kind of where I'm leaning at.
Okay.
I did, by the way, teach a course at Kangwon National University to students in Kangwon National University in Korea from Kazakhstan. And we did all of that by video conferencing. All the lecture was by video conferencing. We did record it and post that for them to access it again if they wanted to, like I would do with Zoom, like I do with Zoom all the time, actually. And then we had we used Facebook for chat, or kind of as a forum, you might say. So I could ask questions and they would respond to it and stuff. And within our video conferencing, we have live chat as well. So they could ask questions by chat if they, or, rather than by video or whatever, if they chose to, and most of them did. They're kind of shy. So they preferred to ask their questions by chat. So, and the students evaluated over those 3 years, the students evaluated that as good or better than their courses on campus. So it is possible to do something by video conferencing that is valued just as much as on-campus courses. According to that experience, doing 3 semesters over 3 years of evaluations with the students.
Yeah, now everyone is moving to the virtual world of meetings, and there are some kind of startups who are renting, for example, lamb and some other animals just to join the meeting to make better atmosphere or something like that. So it's very funny actually, but it's a trending now. Okay.
Yeah.
In your personal opinion, how do you think what economic consequences await us, and how long will the global economy recover after a pandemic? Yes.
Well, that scares me. That really scares me. We could, even though Trump likes to claim the strongest economy in the world's history, basically, while he was doing very well, and I admire what he was able to do with the American economy, don't get me wrong. Any claim by Obama that he was responsible for Trump's success is a joke, except to the fact that under Obama, on YouTube, there's a conversation between Harvard professor Clayton Christensen, who's the creator of the disruptive innovation theories. I don't know if you're familiar with that. He was conversing with Mark Andreessen, who was one of the early internet innovators, the creator of Netscape web browser, which was the strongest competitor before Google displaced it. But he's now a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. And so they were having this conversation. And one of the things that Andreessen pointed out was that in 2016, this is when they were conversing, in 2016, there were something, my memory may be a little bit off, but every year the top paying out something like $1 trillion in stock dividends rather than investing it into their own products, own new innovations and stuff. They were too scared to innovate under the Obama administration, even in 2016. And so they were just paying out their dividends, paying out all their profits and dividends. Also, Andreessen pointed out that it was like there was $5 or $6 trillion at that time invested into negative yield bonds. In other words, bonds that would guarantee you would lose money. But the world was so afraid of the economy in 2016, before Trump, that they were willing to invest, $5 or $6 trillion into negative yield bonds. And so, in a sense, you could say Obama was, to some degree, could get some credit because all that money was sitting there for when Trump became president. All that money, trillions of dollars, was sitting there in negative yield bonds that people were hungry to put into stock when they were confident that the economy was going to boom. And so in that roundabout way, Obama was responsible for trillions of dollars flooding into the market once Trump was made president. So only in that sense does Obama have any credit for this, is that everybody was scared of his economy. And everybody in the world was scared of the world economy at that time. So we had 3 great years under Trump of all this money flooding into the market and into innovation. Now, on one hand, my theory was because of that, well, one of the findings of Dr. Christensen, who every 2 years, the UK universities, the top UK universities, give an award for the top business mind in the world. And he was named 2 times in a row. So basically, he was officially the top business mind in the world for 4 years. He probably still is, kind of like Michael Jordan. Didn't always win MVP, but he always was the MVP in reality, right, during his hot years. And probably Clayton Christensen is the MVP of economics and business for more like a 15-year span, not a 4-year span. So one of the things that he found was that there are 3 types of investments. I'm sorry to take your time, but this is to me was very revealing in trying to understand the Trump economics and what was happening. So there's 3 types of investments. One of them is called sustaining innovation, and that is just to make your current products a little bit better at a time, just better and better and better. One is called efficiency innovation, and that's basically just investing to make yourself, as I said, more efficient. Efficiency innovation usually leads to more unemployment, because by the very nature of the easiest place to save money is with the labor cost. And so during the time of Obama, we had efficiency innovation and sustaining innovation. We never had the third one, which was disruptive innovation. Disruptive innovation is what changes the world. Disruptive innovation is Apple, products like that, is smartphones and stuff that just totally change our whole society. That's disruptive innovation. And it totally disrupts it across many different industries, like that type of technology has, mobile technology has, obviously. So that was not happening, as Andreessen was pointing out. That's what happened during Obama years. There was almost no disruptive innovation going on, with a few exceptions, like Google was still making billions of dollars, and so they were putting their money into things like quantum computing and stuff like that. So now you have all this money going into the market. Presumption is a lot of that is going into disruptive innovation. One of the things that Christensen points out is that one reason why people were depending on like more efficiency innovation than disruptive is that efficiency is safer. It pays out almost immediately. So you invest and you get a payout almost immediately. It's very safe. Disruptive innovation is not as safe. It can change the world, but even if it changes the world, it may take at least 5 to 10 years before it gets to that stage where it's making huge profits. So I think that's where we're at with the Trump economy, is where in less than 5 years, we have a bunch of money going into disruptive innovation, but it isn't going to pay off yet. So before this happened, I had great hopes for particularly the American economy, because this, perhaps trillions of dollars was going into disruptive innovation that could change the world. And indeed, there are the things that are about to happen: AI, quantum computing, 5G, all this sort of stuff is going to change the world. But if we go into a Great Depression, how will that impact it? I don't think, because almost all countries, almost all, not all of them, but almost all countries have gone deeply, deeply, deeply into debt in addressing the Great Recession and now the coronavirus. We are nowhere near as strong as we were in 2008 when we slipped into the Great Recession. We have way overextended. To go into debt, you have to sell your bonds to somebody, or you have to print money. Print money is very dangerous, and to just sell your bond, I mean, if nobody will buy your bonds, you can't sell them, other than to yourself. And so it is a very scary time for the world economy right now. I do not know. Nobody really knows. I think President Trump is right to try to get it started as soon as possible. I know because the American press is so anti-Trump and they're so aligned with the Democrat Party, he has to be very careful or he will not be reelected. At the same time, he knows, and people that understand this understand that a Great Depression will be far worse than now proceeding as safely as possible in reopening the economy. It'd be far worse. But the American press is going to give him all sorts of hell for doing that. There's no question.
Okay. Yes. And we have also an interesting case about Sweden, which hasn't enforced a quarantine. Well, is it some kind of a blunder from their side, or they just will take care of the situation and move forward? How do you think? Because lots of people are willing to go there because there is no restrictions, no self-isolation or something like that.
Well, I think